Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good day to you. That's depending where you are in the world. I'm in London doing the nighttime devotion from the devotional Christ Triumphant. The title today, Abraham's failure of faith can serve as a warning to us. Genesis 21:14. And Abraham took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. Abraham had accepted without question the promise of a son, but he did not wait for God to fulfill his word in his own time and way. A delay was permitted to test his faith in the power of God, but he failed to endure the trial. Thinking it impossible that a child should be given her in her old age, Sarah suggested as a plan by which the divine purpose might be fulfilled, that one of her handmaidens should be taken by Abraham as a secondary wife. Polygamy had become so widespread that it had ceased to be regarded as a sin, but it was no less a violation of the law of God and was fatal to the sacredness and peace of the family relation. Though it was at Sarah's earnest entreaty that he had married Hagar, she now reproached him as the one at fault. She desired to banish her rival, but Abraham refused to permit this. For Hagar was to be the mother of his child, as he fondly hoped, the son of promise. When Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. She made her way to the desert, Hagar, and as she rested beside a fountain, lonely and friendless, an angel of the Lord in human form appeared to her, and he bade her, "Return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hands." As a perpetual reminder of his mercy, she was bidden to call her child Ishmael, God shall hear. When Abraham was nearly 100 years old, the promise of a son was repeated to him, with the assurance that the future heir should be the child of Sarah. But Abraham did not yet understand the promise. The birth of Isaac, bringing, after a lifelong waiting, the fulfillment of their dearest hopes, filled the tents of Abraham and Sarah with gladness. But to Hagar, this event was the overthrow of her fondly cherished ambitions. Ishmael, now a youth, had been regarded by all in the encampment as the heir of Abraham's wealth and the inheritor of the blessings promised to his descendants. Now he was suddenly set aside, and in their disappointment, mother and son hated the child of Sarah. The general rejoicing increased their jealousy, until Ishmael dared openly to mock the heir of God's promise. Sarah saw in Ishmael's turbulent disposition a perpetual source of discord, and she appealed to Abraham, urging that Hagar and Ishmael be sent away from the encampment. The instruction given to Abraham touching the sacredness of the marriage relation was to be a lesson for all ages. So Abraham's failure of faith can serve as a warning to us. So this is regarding Abraham being promised by God that he will have a son, and it was promised to him. And the son, he will be a father of a great nation, and there'll be nations upon nations from them. But the son was the promised son of God. And they waited and waited. And of course, Sarai, as her name was then, was getting on in years. Quite old, past childbearing years. So of course this was a miracle, because there's no way she should be having children at that age. But she, not believing that it was possible for her to have a child. And it was at the time when she was in the tent. This is when the 3 visitors came to Abraham before they went to Sodom and Gomorrah. And they said to Abraham, you will have a son. You'll be promised one of God, and you promise you will have a son. And at that time, Sarah was in the tent. She overheard and she laughed. Because she was basically saying, poof, me at my age, how am I going to have a son? I'm past childbearing years. And of course, it was like mocking God's promise. And the angel, or rather God said to her, why is she laughing? Is anything too hard for God to do? So anyway, Sarah got impatient. She said to Abraham, take my servant Hagar, have a baby with her, and he will be the heir, he will be the promised son. Which of course Abraham did. Now the difference there being is Hagar was the servant of Sarah. So therefore Ishmael, when he was born as a servant, as a slave. And he wasn't free. The difference there being is that when Sarah did eventually have her child, he was free. He was not a slave or a servant. And that is the difference. Ishmael is considered the originator of Islam, who all, going by this, were born into slavery. And of course, Isaac, the son of Abraham and Sarah, was the promised son, the blessed one. Make of that what you will. But that is what happened. God promised Abraham a son. How often do we take things into our own hands? Instead of waiting on God and trusting him, just doing our own thing. We all do.